So for the Dallas Cowboys, there is no Dak Prescott. There is likely no playoffs. What now? What would make us keep watching? What is up, everyone, and welcome into A to Z Sports Dallas Primetime. I am your host, Mauricio Rodriguez, streaming with you live every Sunday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central, and catching up with you Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays with quick hitting videos such as this one. Tonight, I want to talk, honestly, about the reality of where the Cowboys are at right now for the 2024 NFL season. They're 3-5. Their playoff odds are at 3%. That's according to ESPN, that calculates playoff probabilities on a weekly basis. That is also according to DVOA. And I am pretty sure that at any statistical model that you look at this point, it's going to be a similar number. And you know what that means? That means the Cowboys are not going to be there in January. And I don't think that is a surprise to pretty much anybody who has been watching closely, because this is a bad team. And add to that it is a pretty banged up team. And add to that Dak Prescott is out for multiple weeks, not on IR yet, by the way. According to James Slater, Dak Prescott is seeking additional opinions on his injury, a very painful injury from the sounds of it, because he probably does want to avoid going into IR and hope that he can give his team a chance. But right now, the diagnosis is an injury that would keep Dak Prescott for over 4 weeks, which would mean he's going to end up on injury reserve unless he finds a second opinion out there that gives him an alternative. But right now, the Cowboys season, with all of that in mind, pretty much seems like it is at its end, right? And I wanted to talk about, we're Cowboys fans. We like to watch the Cowboys. If you're watching this show, you probably do not want to tune out for the rest of the season. So I thought, why don't we have an honest conversation about where the Cowboys are at, and why don't we discuss what should smart Cowboys fans focus on? Because a lot of people will be like, well, you know what? I want to see if they turn this around just miraculously, and that is completely valid for sports fans. But there's a lot of fans out there that might be a little bit more realistic, and that might be, hey, you know what, this is done, but I'll keep watching. What should I focus on? So I thought about that for a moment, and I honestly thought, you know what, one of the biggest storylines for the Cowboys will be all about the quarterback position. And I think that is Cooper Rush versus Trey Lance. It's pretty clear how the Cowboys really feel about this one, and that is they like Cooper Rush. That has been evident for a long time. Back in training camp, Cooper Rush was not sat immediately by Trey Lance. Credit where credit is due. They did ask Trey Lance to prove it, and he didn't, right? He had full preseason games to sway the Cowboys coaching staff his way. He didn't. And that preseason finale with 5 interceptions pretty much was the nail in the coffin of that quarterback battle. And thus, Trey Lance has been the number 3 inactive quarterback, emergency quarterback, however you want to call it, for the entirety of the season. That was also the case back in 2023. Right now, it's going to be the Cooper Rush show. There's not going to be a QB controversy, I would say. But if you're watching the Cowboys, here's the one scenario that I could see Trey Lance finally getting some playing time, for better or worse. I think, one, you would need Dak Prescott to go on IR. I think as long as there's a possibility that Dak Prescott returns sooner rather than later, the Cowboys are going to stick with Cooper Rush, stick with what they know, and hope that he can steal 1 game or 2 games. And maybe when Dak comes back, even if it's a very, very low number, maybe the Cowboys are still mathematically in the hunt, right? That being said, though, it would be that and Cooper Rush just stinking it up, right? Having Dak Prescott on IR, having Cooper Rush struggle, and thus the Cowboys losing ball games, and then being like, you know what, we're out. Maybe Dak Prescott can come back, but we won't even risk it. And maybe then you give Cooper Rush the chance to play. The thing about giving Cooper Rush the chance to play, though, is that it honestly is something the Cowboys won't get anything out of because they don't control him beyond 2024. He is going to hit free agency in 2025, and the Cowboys are not going to get anything out of Trey Lance if he ends up playing well. That is the one thing that I think will keep Trey Lance away from the gridiron unless Cooper Rush really plays some terrible football over the next few weeks as he replaces Dak Prescott. If this was 2023, we would be having a different conversation because then the conversation would be, forget about playing Cooper Rush now. Let's get Trey Lance on the field, and hopefully by the end of the season, he looks like a serviceable QB that might net us some legitimate draft compensation whenever a QB goes down. Say that the Cowboys had that happen in 2023, then Trey Lance suddenly becomes a guy a team might give up a third rounder for. But this is 2024. The Cowboys don't control Trey Lance, and the only reason they would have to decide to play him over Cooper Rush is if Rush is so bad that they just think it's worth taking the risk of playing Trey Lance. But for now, the Cowboys have gone 5-1 with Cooper Rush, and they've seen him. They know what they give them. They know he's unlikely to have a 5-interception kind of game on the field, so they're going to keep him on the field there and try to win ball games with them. I wanted to open with those QB thoughts just because a lot of the conversation is going to center around that naturally because they are the quarterbacks. And I did want to dive into the whole thing about if you're playing Trey Lance, why would you be playing Trey Lance? I think the Cowboys get nothing out of it. So it should come down to who do you think is best? Some people might argue, well, what if they tank, right? What if the Cowboys say, you know what, we'll tank, we'll aim for the better draft picks. I don't think the Cowboys will ever want to do that from a front office point of view. You might tell me that this front office, hey, will never go all in, and I will be in agreement with you. They will never really risk the future of the franchise. But they won't also, they also won't risk the present. The Cowboys want to be relevant, and if they were truly sold on tanking, then they would have traded players away at the trade deadline. They would have tried to get, even if it was a late round draft pick for one of their future free agents. Maybe they would have dealt away Osa Odigizugwa, even if he's one of their best players, especially at a position where they don't have anything else going on, and that is defensive tackle. But say they were convinced that they were not going to pay him in 2025, it would have been a smart move within that context. If they knew for sure we're not going to pay Osa, then let's get a pick out of him. But the Cowboys, even if they're not going to pay Osa, I think they wouldn't have dealt him away just because they want to stay decent enough to the point where they might still do this one game versus the Panthers. They might still do this. They want to stay relevant is what I'm trying to say. With that being said, man, I've got a list of players that I really want to focus on for the rest of the season. And these are young players that might still give the Cowboys a chance in 2025 and 2026. Or rather, let me rephrase that have a chance of being contributors for future Cowboys teams. So players that are also going to get a lot of playing time, maybe just based on the context of the season. And number one on the list, I think, not because he is the top player here, but because he is perhaps the most relevant this particular week. New wide receiver Jonathan Mingo, new Cowboys wide receiver that is. A lot of people have labeled the Cowboys as buyers because they went ahead and they got Mingo. I don't understand that. I don't think the Cowboys were buyers when they made a move for Jonathan Mingo. I really don't think so. Because when we label a team a buyer, that's when a team is trying to get actively better for that season. This isn't what the Cowboys did. The Cowboys went ahead and they got a player that they liked 2 years ago during the NFL draft, or a year ago in the NFL draft. And they said, you know what? We want to see if this player has what we thought he had. And the good news is he's a cheap player and he's under contract for not this season only, but 2 more seasons after that. The Cowboys got Jonathan Mingo thinking about 2025 and 2026, not about 2024. They get to take a close look at him now because they now get him for half a season. But they're mostly thinking about 2025 and 2026. I still think the compensation, was too much. But as I explained on Tuesday, it's not because of who the player is. That is because of the financials. A lot of these players end up going for cheaper deals because they have a 1-year deal left in their contract. But Mingo has 2 more seasons additional to this one, and he's on a rookie deal. He was bound to be a little bit costlier than many would have expected. And I'm not defending the trade. I'm just trying to make sense of it. And he naturally becomes one of the players to watch. Does Mingo give the Cowboys what they want? Is he somebody that might impact the plans at wide receiver next year and the year after that? We will find out. Hopefully that's a yes, because hopefully the Cowboys do not regret giving away a 4th rounder for the 2nd consecutive year. Other names on my list, man, and these are the very obvious ones: Tyler Guyton, Cooper Beebe. Tyler Guyton, he's had his moments. He's absolutely had his moments. There's a lot of penalties, right? There's a lot of flags. And that goes for holdings, that goes for false starts, and he's had some other calls against him throughout this season. But now you get free offensive line development, if you will. Before, the conversation was, oh man, I kind of understand why they want to develop them, right? Cooper Beebe and Tyler Guyton. But the thing is, they got to be good now because we're trying to get into the playoffs. Now that pressure is a little bit taken away, because now it's just about them two being better so they can be viable options for the offensive line in year 2. If they go out there and they keep struggling by week 18, what does that mean for the future? I really don't know. But those 2 players are arguably the most important players for your team right now in terms of evaluation and thinking about future years. Because if you're the Cowboys, you really want to figure out if Cooper Beebe is a viable long-term starting center. And that goes even more for him than Tyler Guyton, because in Tyler Guyton, they did invest a 1st-round draft pick, which makes it a much more serious investment and a guy that they just need to have step up, right? The offensive linemen are the obvious ones. I'm going to go with other rookies, right? I'm going to go with Marius Leofau here, because he's somebody that you could see really earning a bigger role for the Cowboys in 2025 and beyond. But right now, there's this tug of war between him and veterans like Eric Kendricks, veterans like the Marvin Overshown is not really a veteran, but he is above him in the depth chart right now. Leofau, who many people want to project as a Mike because of how people praise his football IQ, could be in one of those spots where we get to a point in the season where the Cowboys are mathematically eliminated and Dallas goes you know what, Kendricks, take a seat, just go take a rest, let us play Leofau a bit so we can evaluate him a little bit more and we can give him some reps. This might end up being beneficial for the Cowboys in the future, and I'm wondering where do those decisions and when do those decisions begin to take place? Because it's going to come to a point for the Cowboys where they're going to have to embrace the fact that they're not going to be playing in January for a whole lot. They're going to be barely getting to week 18 and then thinking about 2025. So that's one of the names that I'm going to be in the lookout for. Another, also in a similar spot, Kalen Carson. Kalen Carson has had some bad moments. Kirk Cousins picked on him last week versus the Falcons. And now we don't know if Deron Bland is going to come back or not. If he doesn't come back, if the injury is a little bit too shaky for the Cowboys to risk him within this context, then Carson is going to keep playing. It's going to be a name to keep an eye out for. He's had some good moments, but he's also been burned in coverage. Even going back to week 1, he's had some missteps in tackling as well. So something to keep an eye out on. And then an underrated name right here, it's Brevin Spanford. Luke Schoonmaker has been just demoted from the Cowboys offense. They're not actively trying to give him a role. He had under 3 snaps last weekend. It was something ridiculous like that. I don't think he's even contributing a whole lot on special teams. I'll give you the exact numbers right now, just so I don't leave you in suspense. It was 1 snap of offense for Luke Schoonmaker. For Spanford, it was 16 For Hunter Lipke, who is a fullback slash tight end, 17 snaps. So the Schoonmaker project appears to be completely over in Dallas. They appear to be over him. So I want to see more of Spanford, right? If they're going to turn the page on Schoonmaker, how do we feel about Spanford when the season is over? He's going to be a player to watch out for. Other items on my list, and this is beyond the players, what should Cowboys fans be watching out for over the next few weeks with the season practically over? Can the coaching staff do anything to save itself from an inevitable end? I would argue not. I would argue Mike McCarthy knows that there is nothing he can do at this point. I would argue the same goes for Mike Zimmer, who ultimately agreed to come on a one-year deal. I don't think that happens, but I think that's why the effort will still be there from coaches. Just an effort overall to try to secure themselves a job in the future. But honestly, it might be too late for that. So even though it's on my radar, I do have expectations of this coaching staff being completely overhauled in 2025. I do wonder, though, what does that look like? Because when the Cowboys moved on from Mike McCarthy, it wasn't like they overhauled the coaching staff. McCarthy was brought in and was immediately told, oh yeah, it's your staff, but it's a staff that includes Kellen Moore. But it's yours, but Kellen Moore has to be in there. And Kellen Moore is obviously running the offense, not you. But it's your staff with Kellen Moore, right? That was kind of like the vibes that you got from that situation. And then later on, they fire Mike Nolan, and it kind of seemed like, oh yeah, it's your staff, but we're bringing in Dan Quinn to run the defense because he's a Super Bowl coach. Not a Super Bowl winning coach if you know, as a head coach, but he was a winner as a defensive coordinator and all that in Seattle. So it's your staff, but it's more, and we just brought in Dan Quinn to just run with it, right? And I do wonder if, for example, when the Cowboys bring in a head coach, there's a lot of Mike McCarthy guys on this particular staff, starting with Schottenheimer. But what about the likes of, say, Al Harris? Are you going to let your future head coach just do his thing? Or are you going to do this kind of thing where you're like, yeah, man, it's your staff, but we're not firing Al Harris because we like him? Because I'm going to be real with you, even though I like Al Harris, I do wonder, is that the proper way of building a coaching staff? But even still, man, just in general, can the coaching staff save itself? Those are some of the things that I'm going to be in the lookout for. I'm going to be in the lookout of how D-Law plays upon coming back, because D-Law is a free agent in 2025. And I do wonder what the Cowboys' plans with him are. And a lot of that might hinge on how does he look like post-injury if he comes back at all, because he's on IR, and we know it was going to be about 6 to 8 weeks, and maybe with the season over, he doesn't even want to come back, but we'll find out more in the future. For now, though, we've gone a little bit long. Let me tell you before I go, though, let me tell you right now, tomorrow we are going to be live 8 p.m. Central, and we're going to be talking Cowboys versus Eagles. Have a good one. Bye-bye.